Pankration was one of the most well-known games of the early Olympics and was first brought into the Olympic Games in 648 BC. Old Greeks considered the game a showing of solidarity and procedure. Pankration was a to some degree odd mix of boxing and wrestling. The main standards were no gnawing and no gouging the eyes, nose, or mouth. Initially, warriors battled bare and oiled. Afterward, thong wrappings were put on all fours. In upstanding Pankration, the washout was the primary soldier to contact the ground multiple times. In ground Pankration, the battle proceeded till the very end or until one adversary yielded rout. An antiquated game played in Mesoamerica included players on a long, limited court, averaging 60 meters 200 feet long, utilizing their hips to keep a ball from tumbling to the ground. A few cycles of the game permitted the utilization of other body parts. The game had legendary and otherworldly essentialness to the Maya, with enormous stone courts regularly a point of convergence in urban communities' holy centers. Players intended to go the ball through one of 3 huge stone rings set on either side of the court without utilizing their hands. The Great Ball Court at Chichen Itza has rings set at 8 meters, 26 feet, high, presented previously. Going a ball through these rings would have been no little accomplishment. Balls were somewhere in the range of 10 and 30 centimeters, 412 in distance across and gauged 0.5 to 3.5 kilograms, 1.17.7 lb. A bigger ball could be deadly if a player was struck by it at high speed. Archaeological proof shows different triumph trophies, remembering portrayals of human heads with a handle for one side, which may have been genuine heads in before adaptations, stone burdens, and hand-cut stones. The game could have life and passing hugeness, with losing groups now and again relinquished to the divine beings. Knattleikr was an old Nordic game delighted in by the Vikings, thought to be like current lacrosse. Players utilized sticks and their hands to hit a hard wooden ball toward an objective. Physical body contact was exceptionally energized and was a piece of the general goal of the game. Members of adversary groups would be coordinated up 2 by 2 who needed to stay with one another for the whole game and couldn't meddle with anybody other than their assigned rival. Beside pursuing your rival, it was worthy to hit your opponent with the stick and wrestle him to the ground. It was not incomprehensible for players to be slaughtered during Knattleikr matches. The game was like a fight in which restricting sets would battle each other for the general great of the group. The point of going the ball through an objective appeared to have been an auxiliary thought. Games could keep going the entire day on an ice-shrouded field. It's not hard to perceive any reason why the cold-blooded blood game of fox hurling has vanished into the history books. Fox hurling was a well-known game among European honorability during the 17th and 18th centuries. Caged foxes, or different creatures, would be discharged into a field, stumbling into slings laid over the ground. 2 partners would be looking out for either end of the sling, rapidly catching the wild creatures and hurling them high into the air. The group with the most noteworthy toss would be announced the winner. Despite the successive wounds from clearly unnerved wild creatures endeavoring to get away, the game was viewed as delicate enough for women to take part in. Any foxes that were not slaughtered during the hurling procedure would be clubbed to death toward the finish of the competition. Club swinging started in India as a methods for creating quality and versatility in officers. The British Army fused club swinging into their physical exercise schedules, and pilgrims brought the old Indian exercise clubs home. Club swinging got famous with men and women the same during the Victorian period. Exercise rooms were built up explicitly for the sport. Club swinging showed up as a gymnastic game at the Summer Olympics in 1904 and 1932. The 2 of which were held in the United States. Contenders held a bowling pin molded club in each hand, swinging them around in an entangled daily practice of moves in a weird blend of shuffling and mood vaulting. The game kept up prominence in the US until the 1950s. The last American championship was held in 1953. Roman games aficionados would rush to watch a decent episode of Naumachia. Resin-manufactured boats were put in a water-filled field and kept an eye on with crew members who might reproduce an ocean fight. The willing members were frequently detainees or slaves who had little choice yet to battle. The boats were frequently kept an eye on by convicts who struggled to the demise in an overflowed amphitheater for the diversion of onlookers. The first Naumachia was held in 46 BC to observe Julius Caesar's triumph over Pompey. Over 6,000 individuals had to battle in the fake maritime fight to fortify Caesar's maritime ability. Not just the reluctant soldiers were slaughtered in the exhibition, yet spectators from all over Italy were said to have been squashed in the crowds. Naumachia were exorbitant in both human and monetary terms to perform, and the training vanished after the Flavian time frame during the main century AD. Not to be mistaken for the cutting-edge hobby of setting up a shelter in nature, outdoors, or campion, was a medieval ball game which frames the reason for present-day football games. One of the most punctual references to outdoors goes back to the 14th century. Matches were held between contending wards, normally after chapel on Sunday, with the item being to convey the ball to the contrary side of town. Teams of 10 to 15 players would confront one another while a ball was tossed into the air. A player would get the ball, going through adversaries and protected by his group to convey the ball to his objective. Much the same as current football, the odd fight between rival groups and supporters was normal. Board track hustling was a well-known U.S. motorsport during the prior pieces of the 20th century. Cruiser racers sped around roundabout wooden tracks, which were banked like current velodromes. These motordromes were inevitably altered to oblige early vehicle hustling. They were economical to develop yet exorbitant to keep up, with the normal track enduring only 3 years. The principal board tracks showed up in Los Angeles in around 1909. And swarms were before long rushing to watch the new hustling scene around the U.S. Board track dashing was an exceptionally risky game, with motordromes in the end named murderdromes in certain papers. Dashing bicycles were worked for greatest speed, however had no brakes, bringing about successive genuine mishaps in which riders as well as onlookers were harmed or slaughtered. The game vanished during the Great Depression during the 1930s. The vast majority of us know about the medieval game of jousting and stories of knights winning a reasonable woman's kindness on the field. Early competitions appeared as skirmishes, where gatherings of jousters occupied with mock fights, as a preparation practice for genuine battle. Singular jousts, or tilts, turned out to be increasingly famous during the 15th century. Two protective layer-clad horsemen would confront each other at the parts of the bargains, accusing at each other of spears leveled. As they sped past one another, every rival would endeavor to either thump his adversary from his pony or break his shield. The energizes would proceed and down the field until one rival guaranteed triumph. An option tilt would see horsemen speeding toward a metal ring, through which they needed to stick their lance. Jousting was ended for less savage equestrian games during the 17th century. Dramatic jousting reenactments can in any case be found in some medieval society occasions today. The game of chariot hustling was so mainstream in antiquated Greece and Rome that the boulevards would be left when a race was on. The most punctual composed notice of chariot hustling is in Homer's Iliad. The races were the essential occasion of the most punctual Olympic Games, just as numerous Greek and Roman festivals. Racers were pulled by up to 4 ponies around a 8.4 kilometer, 5.2 miles, course in shaky carriages. In Old Rome, chariots would be separated into groups or hues, with up to 3 chariots for each group. Like present-day sports, fans would back their picked groups, wearing the group hues in support. There seem to have been scarcely any guidelines associated with the game, with drivers whipping their ponies as well as adversaries. The speeding chariots were inclined to crash, with drivers regularly executed or truly harmed in the destruction or tangled in the pony's reins. The bloodletting added to the diversion for the spectators. The risky game was one route for slaves or the ruined to improve their status throughout everyday life, procuring noteworthy totals of cash in the event that they became effective charioteers. The Circus Maximus was the biggest reason constructed chariot dashing scene, with a limit of more than 150,000 onlookers, is as yet one of the biggest brandishing fields at any point fabricated. Chariot hustling in the end blurred into termination after the fall of the Roman Empire. Thanks for watching and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.